Welcome back to the channel. So usually I start off with showing a screenshot of the actual channel itself, but I decided to start off with the Instagram page this time around since I figure I don't promote it directly outside of the streams themselves, where I just have it there underneath my name. So Carlos Cards 12, that's my Instagram handle, and it's actually a pretty good hub if you are interested in keeping track of what's going on. Usually I'll post cards and things, that's the majority of it, but if you ever want the latest link for, and you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want the latest link, I'll usually put on the latest video or the upcoming live stream in the description there in the bio. So it's just an easy way to catch me. Otherwise, if you want to message me, that's probably the easiest way to do it, the easiest way to communicate with me. So this video, I wanted to get back to something that I hadn't done in a while. The news has been a little bit quiet, so I haven't bothered with it, but I thought it might be a good opportunity to do a little around the hobby thing. In relative terms, it's been a little bit quiet, but there are a couple of things this week that I thought were worth at least talking about for a couple of minutes. So let me start off with this one. So this one's kind of got a little bit of local flavor, a little bit of a Canadian flavor, just because obviously we're very much into the hockey side of things over here on this side of things. So the Upper Deck has announced that they've got an NHL license extension. So basically, Upper Deck has been able to come to an agreement with the National Hockey League and the NHLPA to continue its exclusive agreement. They haven't specified the amount of time, but as they mentioned, it is considered to be a long-term extension. Now, I'll leave, as usual, the links to this. So this is from the Sports Collectors Daily article talking about it. Originally, they had gained the exclusive rights again 2014-2015 season, renewed the contract in 2019, and they're continuing forward with it. So it does give them a little bit of stability, which is good for them, and it's good that the NHL was able to come in agreement with it. I will say, though, and this is kind of where I'll take a little bit of a contrarian view. There are a lot of folks, obviously, on the hockey side of things that make it out to be like a big deal for, a big deal. I'm a little lukewarm on that. It's just continuation of the status quo, which isn't a bad thing. It's good for Upper Deck. The other thing as well is that we don't know if, Fanatics actually made much of a play for it. Did they make an offer? Was it a big offer? Because a lot of times when Fanatics was doing to get those other licenses and get those other exclusives, they were making very large offers and offering equity. Now, is it a case of the NHL and NHLPA rejecting that kind of an offer and saying, oh no, let's continue and stay loyal to Upper Deck? Or is it a case of Fanatics maybe made a token offer, but it wasn't nearly as grandiose as they went to go get? Because realistically, Fanatics could go forward with the other three major sports, and that would be more than enough, and leave Upper Deck to this. Also, the option is still there to potentially buy it and just get the license by virtue of owning the company. That's not anything that I would, count on directly, but it would be a play if they wanted to get some of the IP and some of the brands that Upper Deck has, in addition to having already all the licenses they have. I just don't think it was as big a deal as they made it out to, but from the Upper Deck perspective, it is good. And for, NHL card fans, hockey card fans that like the stability and knowing what's coming forward in the next couple of years, it is good to know that Upper Deck will still be in the game as far as that's concerned. So that's good. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, on the other side of things, this one is one that I thought was kind of interesting. So Panini has gotten the WWE license in a multi-year deal. So they're going to be taking over from Topps. Now, there's a couple of sides to this. Number one, obviously, Panini having lost out on the basketball and football rights over the next couple of years when Fanatics starts taking over those, obviously was probably interested in getting themselves some other licenses. And WWE is kind of an interesting one because WWE is obviously a very big player in the wrestling landscape. Wrestling cards are starting to see a little bit of an uptick. They're starting to get some bigger and bigger sales. So having an IP like this and having a license of this type is an interesting thing. Upper Deck, by contrast, has the AEW license, but their first product has been delayed into December. Originally, it was going to come out, in the next couple of weeks in November, but it's going to be interesting to see how the AEW first initial product does. I will say, and I'll talk about it maybe more later on, I will say that the initial offering is going to be a little bit interesting because they decided to go an approach of focusing on the inserts and less on autographs and things like that, where usually like a WWE product has your memorabilia and autograph kind of things as part of it. And with Panini, you're going to get a little bit of that, as well as, think WWE Prism, think the variety of different WWE Select, perhaps. And you'd be looking at, parallels du jour, as well as, probably a lot of autographs, because the Topps products had quite a number of autographs in almost every box, a couple. So I would expect that to continue because that's been their MO so far. They like to fill the boxes with a lot of that type of memorabilia. So nonetheless, I will say this is probably a pretty big deal from the perspective that both Panini trying to solidify itself, but as well as Topps losing another license. So right now, Topps is not exactly on a great run. It'll be interesting to see if Topps is able to acquire any licenses to stabilize itself. But this is a good move for Panini potentially to be able to, add some additional holdings to what they have. Because if they're going to lose basketball and football, well, then they're going to need something, not necessarily to replace it, but at least to, give themselves a little bit of a stake in the market as far as having things to produce. The other aspect of it that'll be interesting to see is obviously now we're in kind of a consolidation and, these companies looking to stabilize themselves. What other licenses are out there? Topps obviously did its bit with having the Japanese baseball license. But, that's not really a big one. At least WWE is kind of a global company and they do have a pretty large profile. So for Panini, this is a pretty good get. I would consider that fairly significant. And it'll be interesting to see if there's any other kind of licenses out there like this that are, up for renewal or possibly haven't been picked up yet that these companies can start picking up. So I expect to see a lot more of this. So for me, this is probably a more significant story. So it is kind of interesting. One other note I'll make about this, and this is going to be dependent upon whether they can release it on time, but it'll be interesting to see. So the first product release they've got here, and again, I will include a link to all these articles in the description so that you can check them out for yourself. But the first product release they've got is 2022 WWE Prism, which should be very interesting. And they want to try to coincide it with the buildup around WrestleMania. So that'll be in the spring, so around April 2nd and 3rd next year. So that would be a pretty big release, obviously, with WrestleMania happening, and WWE would be kind of at its apex of promotion for the year. That's the biggest show of the year, and having a product like a Prism coming out around that time would be huge, like as a cross-promotional thing. That's why I say this could be very, very interesting. And in the same vein, it'll be also interesting to see what other Panini-related properties they would use. Would they do like a Mosaic? Would they do, National Treasures? Like there's some possibilities. It'll just be interesting to see because obviously there is a little bit of Topps was able to give it a go as far as having a little bit of high end, and I wouldn't be surprised if Panini took a stab at that as well. Panini Prism obviously being a bread and butter product for them, but some of their other product and properties that they own would make very interesting products with the WWE, veneer on top of it. It'd be interesting to see what approach they would take to that. So that's why I say it's kind of interesting. And then for wrestling card fans, this is kind of a big deal because it creates this, it gives another little delineating line in the development of this license. And also, it'll create the scenario where you're going to have that last year of Topps product and first year of Panini product, and would that have some kind of a premium one way or the other? Now, this last one is kind of interesting because this one went a little bit under the radar. So those of us who are on the PSA mailing list for various reasons, a couple of days ago received a message from PSA from Steve Sloan. And on the surface, it doesn't seem like it's much of a big deal. And I would say overall, as far as an immediate impact, it is not a big deal. And I'll explain why. But I want to make clear that I believe that there is potentially something interesting about this down the road, and I'll mention exactly what it is. So it's just a quick message talking about, how unprecedented levels, record number of submissions, and now they're, growing to 40,000 cards processed per day, the usual thing, first paragraph. And then specifically, this is from Steve Sloan talking about change coming. So Steve Sloan has accepted a new position with PSA's parent company to become its chief marketing officer. So it's basically like, a promotion or a lateral move or whatever you would consider that to be. So it's just a reshuffling of the deck over at Collectors Universe, just with Steve Sloan moving on from PSA as president of PSA directly to being the chief marketing officer of Collectors Universe as a whole, so the mothership. Now, the reason this is interesting is not because of that specifically, because in the interim, that's not really going to make much of a difference. However, the interesting part is not that, Steve Sloan is moving to another position within Collectors Universe, because like I said, in short term, that's not a big deal. What is interesting, though, is the person that's going to be taking over, and that's Kevin Lenane. I probably butchered that, but nonetheless, he is going to be coming in as PSA president. Now, if the name doesn't ring a bell, totally understandable, but he was the one who was actually the leader of Genamint, which was purchased by PSA. Now, he had been working as the vice president of product for the last 7 months. Now, Genamint was that company that was utilizing that technology, the scanning technology, to be able to create those digital fingerprints of cards, if you remember from back then. And again, just to be clear, at the very outset, I don't expect there to be any major change. I expect it to just be a clean transition as you move from Steve Sloan over to Kevin Lenane. However, going forward, I would expect there's a real possibility that bringing somebody in like that also means that you're going to have someone who is already associated with the Genamint product maybe then leading to a new emphasis on shifting over to utilizing that technology more in a much bigger format with the PSA product. So it's one of those things where it isn't an accident that you would put him in that position. You could put him in a variety of different positions, but saying you become the president of PSA could be saying that, hey, you're coming in as president of PSA, but you've got a mandate and there's something specific that we want you to do. We want you to come in and incorporate your gentleman product into what we're doing even more so. Because there had already been the start of, utilizing it in a certain way, but, from the collector standpoint, from our rank and file category, we didn't really feel it. We're not really noticing it. There's a possibility by bringing him in and putting him in this position that there could be some stuff where now you're going to get a chance to actually see what it means to incorporate some of that technology. Does that mean that it's going to, robotic grading, AI grading? No, I don't think it's necessarily going to be the case. However, it might be useful to have a quote unquote fingerprint of items where you can detect alterations. It'll be useful where you can, have scans of things where maybe a patch is altered, where a card has been, modified in some way, and being able to better detect that kind of thing. And like I said, like I've mentioned in the live stream previously, PSA's already gotten a little bit better by incorporating scans of some of their cards as more things have been coming in, so that if somebody was to run a scan of a specific card, they can actually see a picture of the card. So if something gets modified and it gets resubmitted, it'd be a little easier to catch, especially if it's something like a serial numbered card. However, with something like creating a fingerprint, quote unquote, that would also allow you to do something potentially with cards that are not serial numbered, but cards that have certain specific characteristics. Well, being able to pick up those characteristics and having a record on file means if somebody resubmits the card after trimming it or doing some kind of alteration, you may have a better shot of being able to detect it as, raising some alarm bells and forcing somebody to look at it a little more closely. So that kind of technology could get incorporated into it, and it wouldn't shock me if putting him in this position is the first step towards incorporating the technology just a little bit more. But it's one of those things that's not going to have an immediate impact, but it's just something to keep an eye out on behind the scenes. That's kind of what I took from this little bit here, even though it's not explicitly stated. So they put in here, we acquired earlier this year to help PSA implement technology in our grading practice to improve efficiency, quality assurance, and turnaround time. Kevin will continue our commitment to improving and advancing the quality of all that we do. So, it's kept pretty vague, but I wouldn't be shocked if that gentleman technology gets a little bit more emphasis, given that the person who originally ran that company, the CEO of that company, is now in charge of PSA proper, with the ability to, with a better understanding that he knows the technology as well as anybody and what his company was on the verge of doing or what they were trying to do. I wouldn't be shocked if the gentleman technology gets incorporated a lot more into the future state of PSA. So that's it for now. A couple of stories that caught my eye. Not the biggest stuff necessarily this week, but a couple of things that caught my eye that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention leading into the live stream on Friday. So we'll be talking about more of that as I usually am inclined to do, in addition to anything else that happens to come up or any other topics or things that the chat wants to go with. The live streams are on the channel Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So this week is going to be our, Halloween special. I'm not going to be in costume, so don't expect that. But nonetheless, I think it'll be kind of fun as we go to the end of October and we start heading into November. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to have the expo. So next week will be a regularly scheduled program, usual, 9 p.m. Eastern on a Friday. But then the week after will be the expo week. So that's where I've got to figure out if I'm going to try to have a live stream or not. Like I mentioned earlier, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably get a little bit of a sense of that before anybody else. And whenever the live streams are coming up, I usually put a little story that basically directs everybody with a little countdown timer to let you know that it's coming up. Anyway, so that's it for now. A couple of stories to sink your teeth into. Links to everything that I've mentioned included in the description. Thanks as always for watching. Like if you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.